go ahead and hit record. Okay, so PMO Advisory, we are a PMI registered educational provider, and that's our number. This webinar is on bridging the gap, traditional to agile project management. I am the author and presenter for this presentation. I am also an instructor with PMO Advisory. I teach the PMI-ACP Agile Certified Professional and the RMP Risk Management Professional certifications. And I've been with PMO Advisory for a number of years now. All right, so again, this is just letting you know the controls and how to operate through that. I had that up as people were joining. All right, so for this presentation, the following are your learning objectives. Firstly, thank you for your time. I know your time is valuable. There never seems to be enough time in the day, so I appreciate your time to join us today. And we'll do my best to give you the most amount of value in the least amount of time as an Agilist myself. So some of the things that we're gonna cover are our goals, objectives for this webinar are to define Agile project management, explain why to use it, determine when to use Agile, and distinguish an Agile approach from a traditional approach. And then lastly, evaluate whether the PMI-ACP is the right certification for you. Okay, so this is basically the agenda we're gonna go through during this time, and at the very end, I'm gonna tell you how you can claim your PDU, which is great. So this is a little bit about myself. I have a bunch of certifications, mostly because I teach those certifications or mentor people in getting different certifications. I also do consulting work. So that requires that I know a little bit about a lot of different things. My focused areas are Agile and risk management. And actually, if you're debating about an Agile certification, I have 4 of them. So I can definitely give you some advice about the different Agile certifications and what they are good for. My favorite is the PMI-ACP, which is why I teach this class. And I can tell you how I got to that understanding and why I think that it is the most valuable, at least in most cases. So this is my experience as an instructor and in the development arena. I've done work on federal contracts. I've done work on private companies and organizations. So the sort of the gamut of that, a lot of software development, a lot of IT work, and also some work that's outside of that, and also work inside of education. I'm a professor at 3 different universities, one of which is Montclair State University in New Jersey. That's probably closest to most of you, although some of you may also know of Post University in Waterbury, Connecticut. I've been teaching there for over a decade. Okay, so this is a little bit about PMO Advisory. So again, we're an REP with PMI, the Project Management Institute, and we're one of the few firms that actually provides training in Agile, traditional project management, program management, portfolio management, risk management, and also for project management offices and developing and putting those together. So it's a wide array that we provide. Many training organizations do not provide all of that. And we do that to help meet your needs as you grow professionally and look for different certifications. Oftentimes people get their PMP, one of the first certifications they get, and then they're kind of curious, where do I go from there? And one of the things that I recommend is if you're doing Agile projects, you might want to consider that. If you do program management, if you do portfolio management, those may be the next steps for you. But most project managers now have their PMP cert, and that's the start, not really the end in my view. These certifications really help you be in the same page as other people. It's helps ensure that you know these standards and you're using best practices for the work that you do. So PMO Advisory specializes in strategic implementation, and we bring together all the professionals associated with business execution. So that includes portfolio, program, project, and risk management. We're an aspiring B Corp, and our social mission is helping students and professionals with improving their careers through training, certification, and hands-on experience. And I am delighted to be a part of the team that provides that to our customers. Okay, so let's get started on what Agile is. So a lot of times I'll talk to people and they'll say they're using Agile. I say, oh, okay. So what method of Agile are you using? And sometimes people are taken back by that. Well, I'm using Agile. Well, Agile isn't a methodology. And a lot of times people will mistakenly say, I'm using the Agile method. Well, there's more than one Agile method. Agile is actually a set of principles that guide teams and that guide development. And more than anything, implementing Agile is a cultural shift. And it is a great solution, but not for all projects. It's a great solution for some types of projects, and we're going to go over that in a moment. When you shift to an Agile approach, so I consider it an approach. Again, it's a set of principles, it's a mindset. But if you think of it, there's sort of a traditional approach and there's an Agile approach. Well, when you shift to an Agile approach, you want to make sure that there's open communication, not just within your project team, but between project teams, stakeholders, and customers. And it's clearly very different from traditional project management, and that's what we're gonna move forward with here discussing. So what is not Agile? Well, Agile is not the solution to all your project management problems. In fact, I've seen many customers implement Agile, and what they really find out is all of the ways their organization is not Agile. Okay, so if you're using Agile for a project, you're going to find out all the ways that you do things to manage projects that are not Agile. It's not a toolbox of methodologies to be used as needed. You don't want to just pick and choose things out of it. You want to select a methodology and follow that methodology. Now, there may be some exceptions to that. You may need a hybrid Agile where you're using more than one Agile method, or you're using an Agile approach along with a traditional approach. But the point is you want to be very intentional about this. Agile is also not the replacement for traditional project management processes. It's another way of doing things. It doesn't mean that traditional project management is no longer needed. There are certain projects where that does make sense, and doing traditional project management is the best approach for that project. And I'll talk about that in these next few slides. Agile is also not one specific method for projects to use. As I mentioned before, there are a number of Agile methods. Probably the method people most commonly know about is called Scrum. There's also Kanban, Lean, XP, a number of other. There's at least, I want to say 15, if not more, Agile methods. There's actually a report from a company called Version 1. They come out with an annual report on Agile, and it's called the State of Agile Report. And I believe they're on the 14th now. It just came out in the last month. So it came out a little bit late. I think it came out in May this year. It usually comes out in April. And it comes out every year. And if you just look up State of Agile Report, Version 1, you'll be able to find it. It's free. And it will actually tell you about some of the different Agile methods, which ones are most commonly used, and what are benefits that people have found from implementing Agile, etc. So it's a really valuable report. Also, Agile is not a reason to not collect requirements and understand customer needs. For example, I had a colleague of mine tell me that she was starting a project as a project manager, and she had some key stakeholders, and she asked them what the requirements were for the project, and they said, we don't have requirements because we're using Agile, so we don't need requirements. And I kind of tongue-in-cheek said to her, well, go back to them and tell them you're done with the project. And she said, what do you mean? I said, well, if they can't give you a requirement, then you can say, hey, we finished we finished the project, we've delivered your product, tell me one requirement that you have that this product doesn't deliver on. So it kind of brings you back to why do we have requirements? To be able to deliver to them. So if you don't have requirements, there is nothing to do. So there is no project. So we definitely collect requirements, have requirements. We collect them throughout the project for an Agile project. So it's not that we don't have requirements, it's that we continuously collect those requirements instead of just doing it at the beginning of the project. And then lastly, Agile is not a way to complete projects without following processes. And if you look at the different Agile methods, they have their own processes. In fact, Scrum, the most common method of Agile, probably has one of the most well-known and recognized processes, artifacts and meetings, structure, basically framework that's set up. Probably one of the most well-recognized of the Agile methods, and maybe even more recognized than traditional methods for project management. So there's definitely processes that need to be followed no matter which approach you're using. So why would we want to use Agile? Well, Agile principles and practices are used to manage change, improve communication, reduce costs, increase efficiency, fundamentally to provide value to customers and stakeholders, and to decrease project risk, particularly in the area of scope. So where there's a high level of scope uncertainty, that's one of the reasons that we know we want to implement or use an Agile approach for a project. Okay, the other key thing here is value. Whenever I hear the word Agile, I think of value because it always comes back to value. Our priority, our focus is on providing value to the customer, and that is how we qualify the different requirements and use that information to prioritize them and decide which work we're going to do when. So when do you want to use Agile? Well, I like to go back to these 4 items to consider when you're looking at whether you want to use an Agile approach or not. So if one or more of these conditions are present, then that's probably a good case for using Agile. First, uncertainty. I alluded to that before. Uncertainty is really risk. So particularly in the area of requirements or scope, if you know that there's a high level of uncertainty with them or a high probability of changing conditions, then that high level of uncertainty is there for that project, and it would make sense to use an Agile approach because Agile allows for more changes, allows for requirements to be gathered throughout the project, not just at the beginning. So that would fit well for that. Next, we have complexity. So complexity could be the content, the integration. So perhaps this project is end result product is going to integrate with another product or multiple products. Anytime the project has a lot of complexity when it comes to stakeholder management or complexity in the solutions, those are reasons that you might want to consider an Agile approach. Innovation. Innovation really goes hand in hand with uncertainty or risk. And so if we're looking at a new technology, new content, a new system, then we know our level of uncertainty is going to be higher. So if the project is very innovative, then we're going to want to look at using an Agile approach because it's going to help to support that better. And then lastly, urgency. If the project is a very high priority and a short timeline, one of the reasons for this is that Agile, we can actually deliver incrementally. So because of that, we can actually deliver things that are usable to the customer and provide value to them sooner if we use an Agile approach. For example, I just am completing a project to develop a course, develop a training course. And this training course, the way that we've developed it is we develop one unit at a time over the course of a number of weeks. And so the development for each unit occurs, and then somebody does a review and some, quality control, and then there's an update made, and then that's actually put into the system, to a learning management system. Well, even if the project isn't done, we could actually deliver that course, because unit 1 was done in week 1, and then unit 2 was done in week 2. And so we can actually deliver that product before it's fully done. If that was a traditional project, then we would have to wait till the end of all development in order to deliver the course. We can actually deliver the course while we're creating it, which is incredible. So that's how urgency is satisfied. Okay, so getting to the next slide here. All right, so I can't talk about Agile without bringing up the Agile Manifesto. So the Agile Manifesto talks about the values that we use for Agile. And it's important, so I talked about, very briefly, I mentioned the Agile mindset. So the Agile mindset is this way of thinking about the project, about the customer, about what we're creating for this project, the end all, product, service, or result. And part of shifting to the Agile mindset, putting your Agile hat on, is adopting and coming from these values. And those are individuals and interactions are more valued over processes and tools. So what we're saying here is we care more about what's going to support our stakeholders than we care about focusing on processes and tools. So that means if we're in the middle of working on something and our customer says, you know what, that thing you're working on, I don't need that anymore. There's something else I need. We don't say, well, you know what, I'm going to finish this now, and then you can submit a change request and we could review it and go through all that. No, you focus on, oh, okay, got it. This is more important to you. Okay, so what are we going to do? Well, you might have to, in the middle of your iteration, you might have to stop the iteration and regroup and reprioritize to decide what you're going to work on. Also, we have working software is valued over comprehensive documentation. Unfortunately, I've worked on many projects where the documentation for the project was a 3-inch wide 3-ring binder worth of material that I believe after we completed working on was probably in need to be updated. So it was very comprehensive documentation, but at the end of that requirements gathering, we didn't have any working software. And if you're not doing software, you can substitute that for working product. Okay, so what we care about more is that we deliver something working. Why? Because if it's working, then it can deliver value to our customer. Documentation does not deliver value in and of itself. This does not mean no documentation. It means that it is not more important than a working product. Customer collaboration over contract negotiation. So the way that I put this is when the project starts, it doesn't matter if you're the vendor or the customer or you're the subcontractor, we're all on the boat, we're all in it together, and we're either gonna sink or float. And so hopefully we're gonna float. And so that's how I've always approached my projects, in that spirit of we're in this together, we're here to help our customer, we're here to deliver value to our customer, and that's more important than saying, hey, that's not in the contract. That's not what you said to do. You changed your mind. We got to focus on what the contract says, and we got to do that, even if it's not going to deliver value to you. Now that makes no sense, right? So this is why if we know things are going to change, if we know requirements are going to change, we know scope is going to change, this is why we want to use Agile. And then lastly, responding to change over following a plan. So what's most important, kind of going back to what I was just saying, is if the customer says, this thing that you're working on, I now realized isn't that important to me. Instead, we really need to do this. It doesn't matter if we had a plan for it. It doesn't matter if we're already working on it. we're going to stop and listen to the customer if it is that critical for them. If it's just something that they want, they change their mind on what they want in the future, we can add it to our requirements list and continue doing the work that we're doing. And when we get to our next iteration or increment, then we can prioritize that. But the point is, we want to always listen for changes from the customer. We want to welcome those things. We don't want to just say, hey, if you didn't tell me what you wanted at the beginning of the project, then it doesn't matter now. Because that's more of a plan-focused approach. Okay, so Agile project characteristics. Agile projects are iterative, they're incremental, and they're time-boxed. What we mean by time-boxed is that at the end of an iteration or at the end of the project, whatever we have done is done, and we don't expand that time. So if we have a 2-week time period for an iteration for our Agile project, and we get to the end of the 2 weeks, if we're almost done with something, we don't just continue working, we stop. And anything that we haven't done goes back on the list of work to do, because it's not actually done, and we prioritize that. That time box helps us to ensure that we're actually prioritizing things, and it helps us to ensure that we don't go over schedule. So we're going to be on schedule, but we got to keep in mind what we were committed to as far as delivering on scope. So Agile requires trust, commitment, and flexibility, not just by the team members, but also the key stakeholders, the project sponsor. And, it's really a commitment to adding value for the customer, trust between the team and the customer to deliver what the customer asked for, trust from the customer that they will be there for you to answer questions, to give you the prioritization that's needed, so that the team can work on the things that are going to add the most value. Agile also requires understanding business priorities, and it requires a significant stakeholder engagement. So for some people, this is challenging for some organizations and some projects. So we think of Agile as being this really great thing and everybody wants to do it. Well, I've seen organizations where the customer didn't want to have that level of engagement. They wanted to give the requirements at the beginning of the project and then walk away and say, let me know when it's done. Well, that's not, Agile doesn't work well with that. We need frequent engagement with key stakeholders and customers for it to be successful. So here's a nice comparison, a high-level comparison of traditional and Agile approaches. And you see here we have in traditional, we have that project management plan, we have regular status reporting, meetings that are facilitated, management hierarchy, so delegation of tasks to get completed, and then we have these deliverables that are reviewed and approved. Well, with Agile, instead of having this uber huge project management plan that details all these different areas of the project and how we're going to manage them, we do incremental planning. So we plan for an increment or an iteration. So we're going to do planning throughout the project at different intervals. That ability to do that allows us to capture any changing requirements throughout the project. We also have, for reporting, we have, instead of having regular status reports, we have daily reporting, and it's transparent. Okay, so we can have a stand-up meeting that happens every day. We can also have reporting that we put on a board, like a task board, or another, we call this information radiator, which is like a big visible report. And it's somewhere accessible where people can look and see what's the status. And I can tell you from my days of development, you lose a lot of time with people walking in your office asking you the status for something that you're working on. You would much rather than walk over to the wall and look at the status, or look on a dashboard if you're working virtually. To be interrupted to ask what your status is a little frustrating. So instead, with Agile, we want to be transparent about reporting, report more often, but take less time to report. In Agile, teams manage themselves, which means they're self-organized. So they're not under a sort of a delegation. So we don't have a project manager that's delegating tasks to team members. Meetings, we have daily meetings, we have planning meetings, we have meetings at the end of an iteration where we look back at lessons learned from that iteration to see if there's an opportunity for improvement. So retrospective, or sometimes called an iteration review. There's actually two parts to it. So at the end of the iteration, we want to do a review with the customer to show them the work we did. But we also want to do a review with just the team to evaluate how we performed and improve our performance. So it's inspecting how the team worked and then looking for opportunities to make changes that are valuable. And then deliverables in Agile, instead of having them at the end of the project, they're frequent and they're focused on providing value to the customer. Okay, so this may be familiar looking to you. Hopefully it is. So this is called the triple constraint, or the project triad, and it is scope, time, and cost. However, we also have quality and risk. And if I were to, I'm trying to get my, it's not going to work. Trying to get my pen to work, but that's okay. If I were to draw this myself, I would put risk as sort of a cloud on the outside of all this. Quality or customer satisfaction sits in the middle, and scope, time, and cost are on the ends here. And so basically what the triple constraint says, that if we make a change, so for example, we add more scope, we either need to provide more money or more time in order to deliver that. If we cut the budget of a project after we've already done planning, so we cut the cost, we're either going to need to remove the scope, or we're going to need to make some change around the time. So, you know, maybe we need to do both. So this triple constraint says there's a scope, cost, and time are tied together. And each of these is affected by the other two. Okay, so that's a fundamental thing that I want you to see before I use that triple constraint in this slide to compare traditional to Agile approaches. So a traditional approach is very plan driven. So what we mean by this is that the scope is fixed. So we have a defined scope. It's defined because the requirements are known upfront and they're fixed. And we use that defined scope to actually estimate the time or the schedule and the cost or the budget for the project. Well, with Agile, we have more of a value-driven approach. And what this entails is that the time and the cost are fixed. So how are these fixed? Well, we know we have a certain duration of iteration that we're going to do work in. So typically 1 to 4 weeks. So let's say our project is going to have an iteration of 2 weeks. So in that 2-week time frame, that iteration or increment of work is our time frame. So that's fixed. Our cost is fixed because we know how many team members we have. Let's say we have 5 team members. And in Agile approach, we shouldn't be changing the number of team members. We should keep that fixed also. So we have a fixed schedule. We have fixed costs. And then what we do is we actually estimate the features we're going to complete during that duration. And what we do is when we go to plan each iteration, we look at the scope, we look at the features that have been provided, the requirements that have been provided that are prioritized, and then we pick the highest priority items to actually do during that time period. Okay, so the time is fixed, the cost is fixed, so we have a fixed number of team members, and we estimate the amount of work we can complete during that duration. So we see that that's really flipped. And instead of being plan driven like traditional project management, Agile is value driven. Okay, so these are some references from this part of the presentation, if that's valuable to you. And now I want to talk a little bit about the PMI-ACP certification. Hopefully talking about Agile has gotten you some interest in this. So what would be the value of getting this certification? Well, it can give you an edge up on other people as far as career options are concerned, salary or job compensation. So one of my colleagues recently said that they've been looking at their job, they've been looking at the industry, and they wanted to get more knowledgeable on Agile because what they were seeing is that more and more projects are using Agile. And so I was talking to her about what some options could be, some different certifications, and actually after some discussion on that, she's now pursuing the PMI-ACP. And again, because she's looking at the industry and there's a lot of organizations that are being more focused on an Agile approach. That doesn't mean they're not doing any traditional project management, but you know, as a project manager, you really want to know both the traditional approach and the Agile approach so you can have either option. So the PMI-ACP also highlights your subject matter expertise and experience in Agile project management. So it's not just passing a test, but you actually need to have experience with Agile projects. Now, that does not mean specifically Scrum. It can be one of any Agile method. And oftentimes I find when people talk to me about this, they actually have more Agile experience than they thought they had. So if that's a question for you and you think that's a limiting factor, please give me a call and I'd love to talk through that with you and remove that limitation for you if that's your concern for this certification. The salary for certified PMI-ACP professionals is actually about 28% higher than those that are non-certified professionals. So that's something more to keep in mind. Having the certification also increases your marketability to existing and potential clients and or employers. It's a differentiator. It shows that you will have some different skills, some additional skills. Oftentimes people who go for the PMI-ACP already have the PMP certification, and this differentiates them. However, it is not required. So if you don't have a PMP certification, that does not mean you need to get one before getting the PMI-ACP. In fact, you could just get the PMI-ACP by itself. It also demonstrates your commitment as to professional development and ongoing education in the area of Agile. And I do that myself. I continue to take classes, attend classes when I'm not teaching classes. Education is very important. We want to keep ourselves, our saw sharpened, so to speak, as I think Stephen Covey came up with that. And it also gives us an opportunity to obtain PDUs to maintain your PMP certification if you have that. Anything that you do around Agile training, even education to get your PMI-ACP is actually going to provide you with PDUs, including this webinar, that you can use for your PMP certification. So more about the value. So from an organizational perspective, a certification is going to provide diversified methods of Agile. So there are other Agile certifications that are more focused on Scrum. The PMI-ACP includes Scrum, but also includes other methods of Agile. So that's one of the reasons why I think it's a better certification to get, especially if your organization is not particularly using Scrum and you want to learn more about Agile. You're going to learn about more different areas of Agile and get certified in that with your PMI-ACP. Most companies tend to use multiple Agile methods or blend of different methods. And so the PMI-ACP is going to support that for yourself, both in the organization you're in now and any future organization you may be in. As far as projects are concerned, organizations that are highly agile and responsive to market dynamics complete more of their projects successfully than those that are slower moving counterparts. So we're looking at 75% versus 56%. So we want to consider that being more responsive, doing more with less, an agile approach is going to help you greatly with that. Some of the reasons for this are that the agile product owner is involved. So the product owner is sort of the customer point of contact. They're involved throughout the process, which means there's more visibility and it supports flexibility. Changes can be quickly built in. So I see there's a few questions. Some people have asked me if I can send the PowerPoint. Absolutely, I certainly can. I'm going to give you my email address at the end, so you can do that. But I also see some people have provided their email address, but best to just email me directly, and I can just reply back to you. And then there's a question by Jose. Can you discuss the role of Scrum Master versus Project Manager? I'm finding that some companies don't want to spend the money to have a full-time Scrum Master, and those tasks are falling on the Project Manager. What tools do you recommend for burn down charts and information radiators? Okay, these are all great questions. Let me address one of them first, and then the others at the end of my presentation. Scrum Master and Project Manager. People often think, well, the project manager, when you implement Agile, becomes a Scrum Master. Well, not necessarily. Firstly, it depends on what method you implement. If you do implement Scrum, that might be the place for the project manager. The challenge is that the project manager has a very delegative role. So they delegate their directive, their leadership style is directive. The Scrum Master has a leadership style that's more of a servant leader. So they're more looking at the team and saying, what can I do to help the team so that they can perform well? So it's definitely a different, very different leadership style. So I would say if you're a project manager and you're implementing Agile, the right way, if it's a Scrum method of Agile, the right way to do it is to really drop everything you know about project management and learn how to be a Scrum Master. And they're very different roles. The Scrum Master is more a facilitative role. They're facilitating the team. They're focused on the process, the method of Scrum, and making sure everybody's following that method. So it's not at all a one-to-one. That being said, I see many organizations when they implement Scrum, they take their PMs and they have them become a Scrum Master. What are my recommendations for this? Well, my recommendations are that project manager get a certification because they need to know Scrum well if they're going to be taking on that duty. And if they can't get a certification, they at least need to be versed what that entails. One of the key documents that can support that is called the Scrum Guide. I do recommend that reading material. It's not very long, but I recommend that to people preparing for the PMI-ACP, along with the Agile Practice Guide, which is a guide that PMI has put out there. I want to answer the rest of your questions, which are very good, Jose, at the end, just because I think they're I don't want to get too much off track. Ashish asks, which is better, PMI-ACP or Scrum Master? If you're talking about certification, as far as those go, it depends on your organization. If your organization is using Scrum, you might want to consider getting a Scrum Master certification. However, here's the challenge with that. If you leave that organization, you go elsewhere and they're not using Scrum, well, that's not as valuable. The PMI-ACP covers Scrum and also covers other methods. So it's going to give you more breadth than some of the other certifications. And from a career perspective, in Agile, it's going to give you a lot more knowledge in a lot of different areas, and I think that that can go farther. So that's my take on that. Let me get through a few more slides and then I'll answer some more of these questions in the chat. They're really, really great. As far as the end of this webinar, a participation certificate, I don't think that you will get one for this, but we do have that REP number, and you can submit your attending this to get your PDU, and you should be fine with that. We have record of who attended, so that shouldn't be an issue, but I don't think we provide a certificate for the webinar itself. If you need it for some reason, you can email me and I can get back to you on that. Okay, so great questions coming along. I just want to get through a few more things and then we'll have the rest of the time for questions. So this is a little bit about PMI-ACP. They've actually updated the site, so this looks a little bit different right now. But if you go to the PMI website and you select the PMI-ACP under certifications, you will see links for things like the PMI-ACP handbook and the exam content outline, both of which are free. The exam content outline will tell you what's covered on the exam, and the PMI-ACP handbook will tell you how, it's basically a guide to help you complete the PMI-ACP application. I compare it to like when you do your tax return, you know, you have the 1040 form, and then you have the book that describes what each line in your form is for. It's kind of like that. So the handbook will help you with your application. These are some of the requirements for the PMI-ACP certification. So there's an experience requirement, both for traditional project management or general project experience, and then also specifically working on Agile teams. So it's total of 3,500 hours. So it's, you know, maybe 1.5-ish, almost 2 years of experience doing projects. And part of that is Agile, and part of it can any project experience. So if you have a PMP currently or a PGMP, you're going to satisfy that 2,000 hours automatically. And then you just have to show those 1,500 hours. Again, if you're not sure if your experience qualifies you for this, that would be a great reason to give me a call and I can talk through it with you and see if that makes sense for you. I am going to be delivering an ACP course soon. And so if that's the limiting thing stopping you, we should definitely talk about it. Next is education. You need 21 contact hours of training in order to get the certification. Application process takes 3 to 5 days. Sometimes that varies, but they're usually pretty quick about it. Sometimes you're audited. It's not frequent. I basically just tell people when you complete your application, don't lie, and being audited won't be a problem. The exam consists of 120 multiple choice questions and takes 3 hours. And your experience that you detail here may overlap experience you had on your PMP application. That's not a problem at all. So this shows you the Agile Practice Guide. If you're a PMI member, you can get that for free. That's something you're going to want to use to prepare for this exam. And then I already talked about the handbook and the exam content outline. Exam content outline talks about Agile tools and techniques and Agile knowledge and skills, which are the things that are covered for the certification exam. And then there's a number of tools and techniques listed there. And there's also knowledge and skills areas. So that details what some of those are. And that all comes from the exam content outline. There's the following domains are covered on this certification, just so you can get a feel for what this really covers. And then how do you apply for it? You go to PMI.org and you can get that handbook and exam content outline for free. And you can use this link, or you just go to PMI.org, go to certifications and PMI-ACP. Okay, so this kind of addresses that question of should I get a Scrum certification, one of the Scrum certifications, or the ACP? So unless you're strictly adhering to one particular type of methodology, the PMI-ACP is going to be more generally applicable. So you're going to have some knowledge of different methodologies for Agile, which is going to be a really good asset for you professionally. So for traditional project managers, the ACP is an excellent complement to other PMI certifications, including the PMP, PGMP, PFMP, and PMI-RMP. It's also well recognized because PMI, the Project Management Institute, is very well globally recognized. Which brings me to the last bullet about them being globally recognized for its rigor. Also, this certification is going to show both experience and knowledge. The other certifications the other Scrum certifications that exist are not tracking your experience. They're passing an exam or taking a training class and passing an exam. So there's a bunch of other certifying bodies out there, and so that's one of the reasons that I think PMI is a good organization to go with for that. I am going to provide my email address at the end. Somebody asked a question about that, and I'm going to answer as many of these questions as I can. Just a little bit more information for you here. So these are some Agile related classes that are coming up. So if you're looking at the screen right now, an easy thing to do is just kind of take a picture with your phone and you can get that information, or you can shoot me an email. I'll give you my email address in a moment, and I can send you these slides so you'll have all these dates. So I have a combination of things coming up. Agile Fundamentals class. This will be after the summer in September, which is good because people often have busy summers. So there'll be a 4-hour class on Agile Fundamentals, which should be really helpful if you have limited exposure to Agile and want to learn more. If you're all in and you want to take the PMI-ACP Agile Certified Practitioner Certification Prep course, I teach it in 3 sessions, 4 hours each, and you'll see the upcoming dates in September and December. If you are interested in it and are chomping at the bit to get to know things before that, talk to me. And you know, especially if you have an organization where there's a number of people that want to take this class, we could actually provide a class to your organization prior to September. So that's these are just our open enrollment classes. Also, there's other things that you can do to prep for September. But we just find this is a good time frame. It's tough to do classes in the summer with people taking vacations, etc. So this certification prep course that I teach, it involves questions, quizzes. We also provide you with not only these 12 hours of live virtual course, but there's also a computer-based training that you can do on your own pace, and I can give you some recommendations on that, which will augment that and give you the 21 hours that you need for this certification. These are some other courses that we offer, a lot of different course offerings we have, and probably the biggest interest right now would be the live virtual ones on the bottom right. So if you have any interest in the PGMP or PFMP, you can also email me if you have questions on that. I'm going to forward you to T-Woo, who's the owner of PMO Advisory, and he can give you some information on that. He is a PFMP, PGMP, and many other certifications that he has, and he's the best portfolio management person that I personally know, and I know probably 600 or more professionals. I don't know, LinkedIn won't tell me how many people I'm connected with. Okay, so again, institutionally wise, if you have an organization looking for certification, these are some options. Now I'm going to answer some questions, but while I do that, I'm going to pull this up so you can have the claim code information. And I'm also going to put my email address in the chat box here. So here I'm showing it on the screen, but I'm going to pop it in the chat box and then go back to that previous screen. So just give me a minute here. That's Parente at PMI-ACP.com. So I put it in the chat box, and let me go back here so you can know how to claim your PDUs. And while I have that up, I am going to go back to questions. Great questions that were asked. Okay, so Jose had a second part to his question. What tools do you recommend for burn down charts and for information radiators? I don't have specific tools that I use for those. I usually use like Microsoft Excel. Honestly, a lot of times I just literally draw something. You know, in a co-located environment, drawing it on the board, on the wall, on a whiteboard works fine. If you're not co-located, you know, many of us have now touch screens and we have paint and we can draw there too. I was actually just having a meeting with a colleague of mine this morning, and I was using my stylus and my touch screen and drawing right on basically a whiteboard on the computer, and you could see it very clearly. So we have a lot of technology to be able to support that. As far as what I use for Agile projects, I tend to use Trello a lot. It's sort of a task board, and Trello is nice because it's free. I used it with one of my clients because they wanted me to use it, and then since then I started using it for some other projects. I also use Excel for a task board. So those are some different things that you can use. When we talk about information radiators, just if people don't know what that means, information radiators are just any of these sort of, you know, real-time, transparent reporting methods, like burn down charts. That's what we would use that for. And we didn't really have enough time to get into talking about burn down charts today, but it's just a method. It's a method of reporting the work that's been completed. Lauren asks, do you have any recommendations on breaking into the project management role? It looks like a lot of PM roles are in construction, and my experience doesn't align there. I'm currently in a hybrid role as an executive assistant / project manager, but I'm concerned that I will get stuck in the EA role indefinitely. Okay, well, actually, I do have some knowledge about that because I teach at a university, and I've actually had a lot of students who were in that role looking to get into project management. One of the things I recommend for people wanting to get into project management is look in your community. Maybe your community has a homeowners association board, or maybe you have some recreational. One of my colleagues was in charge of like a tennis club, and he got some project management experience there. He actually did it for years, so he had a lot of project management experience. If you're involved in any other community organizations, excuse me, hang on a second. My throat's been a little dry today. Church groups, if you're involved with any sort of church community, they always need project managers to do all sorts of things. So I recommend volunteering to manage a project. There's also events, things like marathons, reunions, excuse me, all sorts of different events where project management relates really well. And even right now where people are operating virtually, I'm seeing events that were meant to be co-located that have become virtual. For example, I had a little virtual reunion with my college class many years ago, graduating college class, and we had a little virtual Zoom meeting. So things like that, you know, volunteering is, I think, a great way to get into project management. You can also look in your organization and see, are there any projects coming up, even if it's like a holiday party or, you know, a summer event that you have every year. Those might be opportunities. Next question that I haven't answered. Jose asked, can you discuss MVP, minimal viable product? I'm also finding that this contentious, not everyone will agree with MVP stakeholders, functional teams, end users don't always agree on a minimal viable product. So in brief, so it's a good question, but it's very, very in-depth for the amount of time we have here. But a minimal viable product is sort of the smallest thing that you can deliver to a customer that provides value to them. So you may be able to give them pieces or features, but they're by themselves don't provide enough value. So for example, if I was going to provide a home page for a web application, I would need to provide that along with a login, because without the login functionality, they can't see the home page. If this is like an internal site or something like that where people need to log in and have a profile. So as far as getting agreement as to what everybody agrees is an MVP, this really comes down to the product owner, because they're the ones that determine what is valuable to the customer, to the business. This isn't something that the team working on the product decides, it's something that the customer decides. Agreed that sometimes end users and the functional team don't agree on this. I would encourage the product owner to make sure that they are communicating with multiple stakeholders, including the end users, to define what the MVP is. And if you're not talking to the people in the end who are going to sit down and use the product you're creating, then the product owner isn't talking to the right people. They need to involve them. So that would be my take on that. I'm sure there's much, much more I can say, but hopefully that answers your question in part. Carl asked if I'm familiar with Discipline Agile. Yes, I am somewhat familiar with Discipline Agile. I was actually recently talking about it with a colleague of mine. PMI is now supporting education for Discipline Agile. It is not part of the ACP, and as far as I can tell, Discipline Agile isn't really anything new. It's kind of the same thing, sort of packaged in a different way. The way I see it personally, it's Scrum along with Scaled Agile Framework, which is called SAFe. That's how I would define Discipline Agile. It's giving you those things in a sort of different packaged way. Most importantly, it's not part of ACP, but what you will learn as part of ACP does relate to Discipline Agile. And PMI has some information on Discipline Agile on their website. And if you want more information about Discipline Agile, you can certainly email me. But it is separate from the ACP. Jose asked what's SAFe. That's Scaled Agile Framework. And what it's about implementing that Agile mindset at an organizational level. So mostly what this presentation is compiled of is talking about using Agile at a project level. Scaled Agile Framework is using Agile at an organizational level. And so that's a bit different to do. And one of the things, you want to scale up to that. You don't want to just hit the switch and say, okay, we're going to be an all Agile organization. You want to scale Agile to do that. It's really a shifting of mindset and a shifting of culture inside the organization to adopt an Agile approach for your projects. And I provided my email address, so I think we're all set there. I have not used Jira. I've known people that use Jira. I'm familiar with Jira. I use Trello just because it's free. That's kind of my rationale for using it. Jira has a lot more functionality and features, but I never look at an approach for project management as being tool specific, just like I wouldn't teach somebody about traditional project management and tell them they need to use Microsoft Project. What's important is following the processes and the best practices. Is not so much about the tools. And so I've done task boards using a spreadsheet. So you don't need a fancy tool. Tools can be helpful, especially in a virtual environment. One of the things I like about Trello is that I can get in there, I can give people access to different projects. They can update things there themselves, so we can all look at it real time together, which is basically, you know, an information radiator. It's a way that I can have the transparent reporting for my project, so that I don't have to, you know, call a meeting to get a status update from everybody. I can just say, hey, Monday morning when you get in, update the task board, and Friday when you leave, update the task board, or every day when you get in and when you leave, update the board. You're welcome, Stella. Thank you. Next question. Let's see. We're like 2 minutes over, but I just want to see if I can tackle everyone's questions here. Somebody asked, I run a group of 1,600 people. We started from scratch. Would it possibly count as a PM experience? Possibly. So it's any project that you've worked on, a project being a temporary endeavor that delivers a unique product, service, or result. So as long as it's not operational, it has a distinct start and end, that would be temporary, and it delivers a unique product or service or result, then yes, it would be a project. And if you want to talk to me more about that, you can go ahead and shoot me an email, and be happy to set up some time to discuss that. Again, I don't want your experience to be the limiting factor from you getting this certification, because I think it's really valuable. So thank you, everybody. Thanks for your thanks. I appreciate it. Suresh has one last question I'm going to answer, and then we're going to close up. And Suresh asked, in Scrum of Scrums, how to manage and report metrics of teams, especially management, still requires weekly reports and schedules, since full life cycle of project deliveries are not aligned to release train of the program. Okay, so I think the question is, can we avoid weekly reporting when we're doing Scrum of Scrums? In my experience using Scrum of Scrums, the organization I was supporting was actually a federal government organization, federal government agency, and for their Scrum of Scrums, they were still doing reporting. And I'll be honest with you, any federal government project, even state government projects, there are going to be some traditional aspects of that, some regulatory things where they need to report certain information in a certain way. So you're not going to avoid that weekly report. However, how can you make it more effective? Can you have some of that reporting be in things that are in the information radiator, that are on the task board, so that you don't have to have this really heavy, weighty weekly report that takes a while for people to create, a while for people to read through, or more, even worse than that, a whole bunch of people work on the report and nobody ever reads it. These are wasteful things. We want to avoid waste, and we want to increase value for our Agile projects. So as far as when dealing with a Scrum of Scrums, this is a large project. So you have a number of smaller Scrum teams. And the reason you have a Scrum of Scrums is because you have a lot of people working on a lot of things. So you need to find a way to communicate that in the most lean way possible. So that means have the most value with the least amount of waste. And that would be my focus as far as weekly reporting goes. Maybe you still need some weekly reporting, or maybe there's something else going on that's not happening the way it could be or should be. The focus should be on add value, remove waste. So you want to be lean, and that's what I would go back to. Okay, so thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for your appreciation, for your excellent questions. And I'm just going to go to the slide with my information on it, so you can have it there, you can capture it. That is not my direct phone number. That is PMO advisory. So if you call that, you may not get me directly, but I am happy to talk to you, especially if you feel like the limitation is your experience, because I don't want people to feel limited by that. The certification is really valuable. I think we can all say in this day and age that having agility, being able to pivot, make changes, deal with change quickly. I think we've all seen in the last few months how incredibly valuable that is for you. And so I hope to impart that wisdom on you so you can have that with you, not just for a certification, but for the rest of your life. Okay, thank you everybody for your time, which I know is incredibly valuable. I appreciate your listening, your awesome, awesome questions, and please feel free to reach out to me, and I hope to see you in my next class in September. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.